Claire tightened the straps of her reflective vest and glanced at the sky, now a deep indigo fading into black. The neighborhood was eerily quiet tonight. Too quiet. A faint breeze rustled the leaves along Maplewood Lane, carrying with it the distant hum of crickets and the occasional bark of a dog. It was the perfect night for a stroll, if she were just a resident out for a walk. But Claire wasn't here for leisure. She was on duty, part of the HOA's neighborhood watch, her first solo night shift. The HOA had been clear about the rules. Watch and report. Do not intervene. It was a policy designed to keep volunteers safe and avoid unnecessary confrontations. But something about this evening's calm didn't sit right with Claire. It felt like the quiet just before a storm. She moved slowly, her footsteps muffled against the pavement. Her eyes scanned the shadows cast by porch lights and tall trees. The houses, all near identical two-story homes with manicured lawns, seemed almost too perfect, too still. Then, a flicker. A shadow slipping between the hedges at the corner of the Jensens' property. Claire froze, heart skipping. Her breath caught in her throat as the figure paused just long enough for her to catch a glimpse. A lanky silhouette, hood drawn low, moving cautiously like a cat stalking prey. The intruder's movements were deliberate but nervous, like someone trying to avoid being seen. She reached slowly for her phone, hands trembling just slightly, and dialed the neighborhood watch hotline. Maplewood Watch, this is Claire. I've got someone near the Jensens' house. Wearing a dark hoodie, looks like they're casing the place. Her voice was low, steady, but inside, adrenaline surged. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. Good eye, Claire. Stay put, and keep watching. Don't engage. Backup is on the way. Repeat, do not engage. Claire nodded, even though the operator couldn't see her. Copy that. Her gaze stayed locked on the shadow, which now crouched near the garage door. Fingers, brushing the frame, testing for weaknesses. She swallowed hard. This wasn't just some kid out for a late-night prank. Whoever this was, they meant business. Minutes stretched like hours. The quiet was shattered only by the occasional creak of a branch or the distant hoot of an owl. Then, without warning, the shadow vanished, slipping behind the fence and disappearing from sight. Claire's pulse hammered in her ears. Where did they go? She whispered, gripping her phone tighter. Hold your position. Someone's approaching the area. Stay safe, Claire. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Claire's eye down the street, a figure darting between parked cars. Her breath hitched. Was it the same person or someone else entirely? Claire's mind raced. The rule was clear, but instinct urged her to move forward, to do something more than just watch. She clenched her fists, heart pounding in her chest. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to dance mockingly. Every nerve screamed at her to act, but all she could do was watch and wait. Because tonight, the quiet neighborhood was about to change forever. Claire's fingers tightened around the phone as the figure slipped behind a parked SUV down the street. Her breath was shallow now, every muscle tense. The neighborhood watch operator's calm voice crackled in her ear, a lifeline she clung to. Backup should be there any minute, Claire. Stay put and keep eyes on the area. Do not approach. Claire wanted to scream. Do not approach? But the urge to act was overwhelming. The figure reemerged, moving cautiously but faster this time, darting between the shadows of manicured hedges and parked cars. Claire's instincts screamed that this was no harmless trespasser. She needed to do more than watch. Her feet twitched, itching to move. The rules were clear, drilled into her at the HOA meeting. Observe, report, don't confront. It was meant to keep volunteers like her safe and prevent escalation. But what if she waited too long? What if this person was dangerous? What if they were about to break in? Or worse? The streetlights flickered overhead, their orange glow wavering as if signaling warning. Claire's eyes tracked the figure as they paused at the corner house. The Martins. The porch light was off. The blinds were drawn tight. A perfect target. Claire swallowed hard, her pulse racing in her ears. Her fingers hovered over the phone's emergency button. She could call 911, bypass the neighborhood watch operator, but then what? Would the police arrive in time? Would she be left alone, waiting and hoping? Suddenly, the figure stopped moving and crouched beside the front door of the Martins' home. Claire's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. The figure's hand slipped under the doorframe, pulling out a small tool. Something, sharp, metallic, glinting faintly in the moonlight. A cold shiver ran down Claire's spine. This was no ordinary vandal or prankster. This was a break-in. Claire? The operator's voice broke through her racing thoughts. You still there? What's your status? Swallowing her fear, Claire whispered, They're trying to get inside. I'm watching. Still waiting for backup. Stay safe. Officers are 5 minutes out. Keep eyes on the target. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Her gaze darted around. No other neighbors were outside. No one else to help. Just her and this shadow, bent on intrusion. Claire's breathing grew shallow. The urge to act clawed at her resolve, gnawing at the promise she'd made to herself to follow the rules. A sudden noise, a faint click, snapped her attention back to the figure. The door handle gave way. The door creaked open. Claire's throat tightened. Her hands trembled, but she kept the phone steady. Back up, please hurry, she breathed. Inside the darkened house, the figure slipped through like a ghost. Time slowed, every second stretching thin like a taut wire. Claire's mind screamed at her to run, to call for help, to do something, but she was frozen, caught between the watch's rules and her growing fear. Suddenly, the figure's head turned sharply in Claire's direction, a piercing, hungry glance that froze her blood. Their eyes locked for a terrifying moment, predator and prey staring down the same silent night. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The figure moved toward the door. Claire took a step back, then another, her body shaking. "Don't do this," she whispered to the night. The figure stepped out onto the porch, clutching a small, heavy object, a wrench or crowbar, their breath visible in the cold air, ragged and sharp. Claire's hands shook uncontrollably. The operator's voice urged, "Calm," but the calm was gone. In that moment, the only thing Claire could hear was her own heartbeat and the thunderous pounding of fear and instinct. The figure took a step forward. Claire's legs were rooted to the spot. Every warning in her mind screamed, "Watch, don't, shoot." But deep down, another voice whispered, louder and more urgent than all the rules combined, "Protect." And in that quiet moment before chaos, Claire's entire world held its breath. Claire's breath hitched as the intruder stepped onto the porch, the cold night air biting at her skin. The wrench glinted menacingly in the dim light, the stranger's face partially obscured by the hood, eyes sharp and calculating. Her heart hammered in her chest, every nerve screaming for her to move, do something, but her feet felt like they were cemented to the ground. "Claire, what's your status?" The voice on the phone asked calmly, though Claire could hear. The urgency beneath the words. "Still watching," she whispered, voice shaking. They're right here." The operator urged her to stay put, stay safe, do not engage. But Claire felt a cold sweat bead at her temples. The intruder was close now, too close. The wrench was raised slightly, as if ready to strike or pry open something else. The moment stretched, taut as a wire, until suddenly the figure spun around, sensing Claire's presence. Their eyes locked. The intruder's gaze was fierce, dark, and wild. And for a flash of a second, Claire saw a flash of desperation behind those eyes. A human being, desperate and dangerous. And then they lunged. Claire stumbled backward, dropping her phone onto the porch steps. The operator's voice was a desperate shout in her ear, but the sound was drowned out by her pounding heart. The figure swung the wrench toward her, a blur of motion fueled by adrenaline and rage. Claire barely had time to react. Instinct took over, every rule she'd been told forgotten in the chaos. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her gun. The cold. Metal felt heavy and real in her hand. The intruder charged again. "Stop!" Claire shouted, voice cracking. "Stay back!" The figure hesitated for a heartbeat, and then Claire's finger squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and echoing through the quiet street. Time seemed to slow. The intruder crumpled to the ground, the wrench slipping from their grasp. Claire stood frozen, breath ragged, eyes wide with shock. The streetlights flickered again, casting eerie shadows over the scene. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the sound of the gunshot. Claire's phone was still ringing on the porch, the operator's voice frantic now. "Claire, are you okay? What happened?" Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she knelt beside the fallen figure. Their hood had slipped back, revealing a face she would never forget. A face twisted with pain and fear. Her hands trembled as she reached out, unsure if she was helping or condemning. Around her, the neighborhood was waking up to a nightmare that would change everything. Claire's world had shattered in one pull of the trigger. The gunshot still echoed in the cool night air as neighbors spilled out of their homes, faces pale with shock and confusion. Claire remained frozen, her hand shaking violently as she lowered the smoking weapon. The intruder lay motionless on the cold pavement, the wrench abandoned beside them. "Claire, are you okay? What happened?" The watch operator's voice was frantic through the phone, now lying forgotten on the porch. Claire's throat felt tight, her mind racing to process the chaos that had erupted from what had started as a quiet night shift. I shot him," she stammered, disbelief lacing every word. "He was coming at me with a wrench. I didn't have a choice." The operator's voice softened but was edged with urgency. "Help is on the way. Stay calm and keep your distance." But calm was the last thing Claire felt. She was suddenly swallowed by the enormity of what she'd done. The rules she had been told so many times, "Watch, don't shoot," now felt like a cruel joke. One shot had shattered everything: peace, trust, and the fragile sense of safety the neighborhood had long taken for granted. Voices rose behind her, neighbors whispering, some shouting for someone to call 911. A few ran toward the scene, others hesitated, unsure of what they should do. Claire's legs trembled beneath her as she knelt beside the intruder. The hood had slipped down, revealing a face pale and grimacing in pain. The stranger's eyes fluttered open briefly, locking onto Claire's. There was fear there, but something else. Regret. "Please," the intruder croaked, barely audible. Claire swallowed hard, struggling to hold back tears. "Help is coming. Just hold on," she whispered, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a young man sprinting toward her. It was Marcus, a fellow neighborhood watch volunteer and one of the few neighbors Claire trusted. He dropped to his knees beside her, pulling out his phone. "I called 911. They're 5 minutes away," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. Claire nodded, the weight of the moment crushing her. The reality hit hard. This was no longer a simple watch duty. This was life or death, a line she never thought she would cross. A sudden commotion stirred at the edge of the street. Sheriff's deputies arrived, lights flashing in the darkness, officers swiftly taking control of the scene. Claire was gently moved aside, questions raining down. "Who shot the suspect?" one officer demanded. "I did," Claire answered, voice barely a whisper. The questions came fast and furious. What happened? Why did you shoot? Were you in danger? Did you identify the suspect? Claire's answers were raw, honest, and filled with fear. She told them everything: the shadow moving near the house, the intruder's aggressive advance, her hesitation, and finally the shot. As paramedics arrived and carefully tended to the intruder, Claire was escorted to the side, her knees buckling, as exhaustion and shock finally caught up with her. Her mind reeled with doubts. Was she a hero or a criminal? Would the neighborhood ever see her the same way again? Had she done the right thing? The question haunted her relentlessly. Meanwhile, whispers began to ripple through the gathered crowd. Some voiced support, thankful for her courage. Others whispered warnings about the dangers of taking matters into one's own hands. Claire's phone buzzed again, a message from the HOA president requesting an emergency meeting at the community center first thing in the morning. As the night deepened, Claire remained trapped in a whirlpool of fear, regret, and a stubborn spark of resolve. One shot had changed everything, not just for her, but for the entire neighborhood, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, a heavy fog hung over the neighborhood like a veil of uncertainty. The once lively streets of Maplewood Lane felt subdued, whispers replacing casual greetings as neighbors eyed Claire with a mix of sympathy and suspicion. The gunshot from the night before had shattered more than just the silence. It had fractured the fragile peace that held the community together. Claire sat in the cramped meeting room at the community center, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Around her, the HOA board members exchanged anxious glances, their voices low but tense. The room buzzed with questions, some spoken, others lurking beneath the surface. The HOA president, Mr. Whitman, cleared his throat, his usual confidence, replaced by a strained edge. "Claire, we appreciate your bravery, but we need to understand exactly what happened. You were told explicitly to watch and report, not to confront or use force. Why did you disobey those orders?" Claire's throat was dry, but she met his gaze steadily. "I didn't have time to think. When the intruder turned on me, I was afraid for my life. I didn't want to shoot, but I had to protect myself." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some nodded in understanding, others frowned, uneasy with the idea that one shot had changed everything. A board member, Mrs. Delgado, spoke up sharply. "This sets a dangerous precedent. If every volunteer starts carrying guns and firing at shadows, where does it end? We risk turning our neighborhood into a war zone." Claire's jaw tightened. She remembered the intruder's eyes, the desperation, the fear. She wondered if the man had any family, any story that had led him here. But she also knew that in that moment, she had acted to save herself. Outside the meeting room, whispers of the intruder's identity began to spread. Police had revealed little, but rumors flourished. Some said he was a petty criminal, desperate and dangerous. Others whispered darker possibilities. A troubled man with a history no one wanted to acknowledge. Claire left the meeting early, the weight of judgment pressing down on her. She walked slowly through the neighborhood, noticing the way neighbors avoided eye contact or stared with a mix of fear and curiosity. Her phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, others cold and accusatory. That afternoon, Detective Harris came to Claire's door, his expression serious but not unkind. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, shaking her hand. "We're still investigating. The intruder's background is complicated. We'll need you to come in for a formal statement and some tests." Claire nodded, feeling the chill of uncertainty. The neighborhood she had called home for years was now a place of secrets and shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was lurking beneath the surface, something no one was ready to face. As night fell again, Claire sat by her window, watching the streetlights flicker. The memory of the intruder's final glance haunted her. Had she really saved her community, or had she just opened a door to a deeper darkness? Her phone buzzed once more. A text from an unknown number. "You don't know the whole story. Be careful." Claire's fingers trembled as she read the message. The game had changed, and she was right in the middle of it. Detective Harris's office was colder than Claire expected, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering above as she sat stiffly in the hard plastic chair. Across from her, the detective shuffled papers, eyes, sharp and unyielding. "We're uncovering things about the intruder," he began carefully. "His real name is James Calloway. Not a stranger to the law, but his recent activities are murky. We're digging into some troubling connections." Claire's heart tightened. What kind of connections? The detective hesitated, then looked away briefly. "There's talk of stolen property, maybe more. We suspect he wasn't just here for petty burglary. This might be part of something larger." A chill slid down Claire's spine. The quiet streets of Maplewood Lane suddenly seemed far more dangerous than she had imagined. Returning home, Claire's mind swirled with questions. Who was James Calloway? And what did he want from their neighborhood? The next days were a whirlwind. Police presence increased. Neighbors grew anxious, and the HOA scrambled to manage the fallout. Claire was hailed by some as a hero, but shadowed by whispers accusing her of recklessness. Determined to understand more, Claire began her own quiet investigation. She revisited the spot where James had fallen, searching for clues. In the bushes, half hidden beneath a crumpled leaf, she found a small leather-bound notebook. Flipping it open, her breath caught. The pages were filled with hurried notes, names, addresses, dates. Cryptic, but clearly important. Something darker than simple burglary was at play. Claire shared the notebook with Detective Harris, who grew visibly tense as he skimmed the pages. "This could be evidence of a larger operation," he admitted. "It looks like James was involved, in some kind of scheme, possibly trafficking stolen goods or worse." Suddenly, the stakes felt higher. This was no isolated incident. The quiet neighborhood was a small piece in a much larger puzzle. But Claire's probing came with risks. That same evening, her car was vandalized. Tires slashed and a warning scrawled across the windshield. "Stop digging or else." Fear surged through her, but so did determination. She refused to be silenced. Neighbors began sharing their own secrets, stories of strange late-night visitors, unexplained noises, and odd behaviors some had chosen to ignore. It seemed the entire community had been living with secrets, hidden behind freshly painted fences and well-manicured lawns. Claire realized the intruder was just the surface of something far more dangerous. The quiet facade of Maplewood Lane was cracking, revealing shadows that stretched deeper than anyone had dared imagine. And now, with her life threatened, Claire knew she had to be careful. But she couldn't walk away. The truth was out there, tangled in lies and fear, and she was the only one brave enough to chase it. Claire's world was unraveling faster than she could keep up with. The threats, the secrets, the silence from neighbors who once smiled warmly, all of it pressed down like a suffocating fog. The vandalized car was a clear warning. Someone didn't want her digging, yet the more Claire learned, the deeper the mystery became. James Calloway was only a pawn. The notebook hinted at a network operating under Maplewood's calm surface, but no one would say who was involved or why. One night, determined to find answers, Claire returned to the house James had tried to break into, the Martins' home. The porch light was still off, the blinds tightly shut. She crouched in the shadows, notebook in hand, scanning the quiet street. Suddenly, a soft click sounded behind her. Claire spun, heart pounding. A figure stepped out of the darkness, tall, with an unyielding gaze that froze her in place. "Looking for trouble, Claire?" The voice was cold, low. She recognized the voice immediately. It was Mr. Whitman, the HOA president. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, trying to mask her fear. Whitman smiled thinly. Keeping the neighborhood safe, of course. That's what I'm paid for, Claire shook her head. This isn't safety. It's control. People are scared because of what's happening, and you're hiding things. Whitman's smile vanished, replaced by a hard edge. Sometimes. Protecting a community means making hard decisions. You've poked around where you don't belong. Claire's mind raced. Could he be involved in whatever James was tangled up in? Or was he trying to keep order, even if it meant silence? Before she could speak, Whitman's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then back at her. Watch yourself, Claire, he warned. Some things are better left buried. With that, he stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. Claire's heart hammered. The man who was supposed to lead and protect them might be part of the problem. Shaken, she hurried home, mind spinning with questions. Was Whitman shielding a criminal network? Was the HOA itself compromised? That night, her phone buzzed again with another anonymous message. Stop now, or you'll regret it. Fear clashed with determination. Claire knew she was on a collision course with forces much larger than herself. In the days that followed, neighbors began to come forward quietly, offering bits of information. Stories of strange meetings in the community hall, unfamiliar faces lurking after dark, even hints of bribes and threats. It was clear. Maplewood Lane wasn't just a peaceful suburb anymore. It was a battleground, and Claire was in the crosshairs. She realized she couldn't trust anyone, not even those sworn to protect her. The shadows were everywhere, but so was her resolve. Claire wasn't just going to watch anymore, she was going to fight. Claire sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the weight of the past week pressing on her chest like a stone. The notebook's secrets, the threats, Whitman's chilling warning, all converged into a storm she could no longer ignore. She had uncovered a web of deceit woven through the very fabric of her community. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. With trembling fingers, she opened the message. Meet me at the old gazebo. Midnight. Come alone. No cops. Her heart thundered, but her resolve burned brighter. This was her chance to uncover the truth. At midnight, wrapped in a dark coat, Claire slipped quietly through the silent streets to the gazebo at the park's edge. The moon cast eerie shadows as she waited, every sound amplified in the stillness. A figure emerged from the darkness, a woman, eyes sharp but wary. I'm Evelyn, she whispered. I was part of it, the network, but I want out. Claire's breath caught. Finally, a break. Evelyn explained how a criminal ring had infiltrated Maplewood's HOA to cover up their illicit activities, stolen goods, intimidation, and worse. Whitman was their puppet, silencing anyone who got too close. They used the neighborhood watch as a front, Evelyn said. James tried to escape their grip. That's why he came here, why he was desperate. Before Claire could ask more, headlights flooded the park. Figures rushed toward them, Whitman and two men, faces grim and threatening. You should have stayed quiet, Whitman snarled. Claire's mind raced. There was no time to call for help. Her hand slipped into her pocket, her gun cold and steady. Whitman advanced, but Claire's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance, she warned. The men hesitated, tension crackling. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights flooded the park. Detective Harris and a team of officers appeared, moving swiftly to surround Whitman and his men. Evelyn had sent a message earlier, her insurance policy. Whitman's face twisted in fury and defeat as officers cuffed him. Claire's breath finally steadied. The nightmare was over. The neighborhood would never be the same, but it would be safer. One pull of the trigger had changed everything. Shattered the silence, exposed the truth, and forced a reckoning. And Claire? She was no longer just a watcher, she was a guardian.